And while they're leaving, you can go ahead and take your Bible, if you would. Go ahead and be turning to Proverbs chapter 22. Proverbs chapter 22. We're going to pick right back up where we left off a couple of weeks ago. Proverbs 22. A little controlled chaos right there, I hope. At least I hope it was controlled chaos, yeah. I'm hoping for controlled. Let's see. Well... if it's okay with you tonight, instead of reading the whole chapter through, I'm just going to read each of the verses that we'll be talking about one at a time. If you would just keep your Bible laid out in front of you right there so that we can and look as we go through the particular chapter. What I want us to learn tonight is that by God's grace, we are gifted, and by our will, we excel. Do y'all see what I'm trying to say right there? Can anybody explain what that statement means to me? What does that statement speak to you? Anybody help me with that? Okay, with God you can do anything, kind of, sort of. Okay, so there's two parts to this thing. That's right. We can do whatever it is that God calls us to. So in that sense, it's right. The first statement is right. The second statement is right too, because there's actually two parts to this. God has given us the ability to be able to do what it is that we do. We just got to figure out what that is that we can do. And then once we figure that out, we've got to have a will that is tenacious, that we're going to carry through and go ahead and accomplish and do what we want to do. So we need to remember that tonight. Now, as we begin to look at the chapter, let's look at chapter 22, and let's dive right into the very first one, where it says, "A good name is to be chosen rather than great riches and favor is better. Riches and favor is better than silver or gold." And all God's people said. All right, so let me ask you this question. Would you rather have $1 million or good character and a good name? Okay, most of y'all are telling me the latter. Let me just ask you this question. Why? Because $1 million, you can buy a lot of stuff with $1 million.
Could we have both of them?
Not tonight. Okay. Some people want it all, don't they? Yeah, temporary, yeah. Yeah. Your character, your moral standing allows you in places that you wouldn't be able to get into with money. I mean, does a rich person really know for sure if they have friends? They really don't, because a lot of people hang out with rich people. Why? Because they're rich and they drop money everywhere that they go. And you get to tag along for all that kind of stuff. But when we have character, that character that we have allows us to have conversations. It allows us to have relationships with people that you can't have with those people if you don't have the kind of character that you have. People will, if you're a person of character, if you're a person that's got a good name and you're a person that has, your reputation has preceded you, there are things that people will tell you that they won't tell other people, because they know that you will guard what it is that you've told them. It will get you into situations that are a good thing that you will never find, that a pile of money will never be able to buy. I wrote down, character can buy things wealth cannot. And there's absolute truth to that, because just being and sharing with other people will show you that money is not everything. Now, we're going to find out in chapter 22. Chapter 22 is all about three things. It's going to have to do with wealth and poverty. It's going to contrast the difference between having wealth and having poverty. And at the same time, it's going to talk about ruin and why people wind up not having some wealth along the way. So let's keep that in the back of our heads as we look at the 10 verses that I picked out tonight. The second one is, God graces people with ability. Now, I think we as Baptists do a really good job of letting everybody know that they have been saved by grace. Okay. But I don't think we do such a good job letting everybody know that the reason you can do what you do is because of the grace of God that is upon you that causes you to be able to do what you do. I look across this room and I see a lot of different faces and a lot of different people. And many of you who are in this room are extremely gifted and talented. You've got wonderful jobs, or you've got your businesses that you've created, or there's things that you can do. And you're able to do those things, and there's probably not but a handful of other people on the face of the earth could do the same kind of things that you do. But the reason that you do it is that God gave you an ability to be able to do that. I know in Philippians, it says in Philippians 4:13, is it 4:13 says, I can do all things through Christ who strengtheneth me. So that means if I just believe hard enough and pray hard enough, I can play basketball in the NBA, right? Mike, can you see me as an NBA player? We're not seeing that in there. No matter how hard I work, no matter how hard I try, I'm never going to slam dunk on the, that shoulder injury is what's keeping me out of it, isn't it? Okay. So there are some things that are impossible. But it's not impossible if God has gifted you with the ability to be able to do that. Now, is anybody 5'7", and I'm technically 5'7" before I started losing height. Is anybody 5'7" ever played in the NBA? Yes, they have. Yeah, they have. But you've had these guys that can do that. But they weren't 60 years old by the time they got there either. You're ruining my illustration here, everybody. What I'm trying to tell you is God gives everybody, that everybody knows Jesus Christ is Lord and Savior. He's given you a brain that's not equal to everybody else's. He's given you a body that's not equal to everybody else's. So everybody's got a little something that they can do. And by God's grace, you're able to do that. Now, you may exercise your brain so that you're better at it. You may exercise your body so that you're better at it. You may exercise your charisma around people so that you're better at it, but you're only able to do that because God caused you to be able to do that. There are people that cannot do what you do. So you need to be thankful to God that He's given you that grace to do that. It says, verse 2 said, the rich and the poor meet together. The Lord is the maker of them all. Now, before God ever put you on this planet, He knew whether you'd be rich, poor, or in America. They don't. Back in Jesus' day, they had the rich and the poor, but now we have what we call the middle class. So a lot of us in America fall into that middle class character. But God knew before we were created that He was making us to succeed the way that we have succeeded. The third one I want to look at is Proverbs 22:4. Proverbs 24 reads this way: the reward for humility and fear of the Lord is riches and honor in life. Now, what I wrote down on that is God does reward those who fear Him. When you remember when Jesus was talking to the rich young ruler, and after He talked to the rich young ruler, he went away sad because he chose not to know Christ. And then Jesus began to talk to them. And the disciples asked this question. And this is what they said after they saw the interaction between the rich young ruler and Jesus. They said, well, then who can be saved? Now, why in the world did they ask that question? And there's a reason they asked that question. Because after they met this rich guy, surely this rich guy was rich. Because the Old Testament taught that if you did everything right, God would make you rich. Or at least that's what they thought. Now, the Scriptures are adamant that those who fear God and those who keep His commandments will be blessed. That doesn't always mean that that's a monetary blessing. But it does mean that they will always be blessed. Okay? We can be blessed in so many other ways that we don't think about. Sometimes we think that having a big pile of money is a blessing, but most people who have a big pile of money sometimes wish they didn't have the big pile of money, because then they got to worry about people getting the big pile of money that they got from them and all these other set of things that those of us that don't have a big pile don't understand. Right? So God does reward those who fear Him, and He rewards them with many, many different types of blessing. God rewards with blessings that may or may not be monetary. Fourth thing I want us to learn tonight comes from verse 6. Look at verse 6 right there. It says, train up a child in the way he should go, And even when he is old, he will not depart from it. Now, I have told you this probably 10 or 15, maybe even 20 times throughout the whole study of Proverbs, that Proverbs are not absolute truths. They are what? Proverbs. Right? Proverbs. So since the Bible has absolute truth, then the Bible has some symbolic language in it, and then the Bible has some things that are relative truths that are almost always true, but he lets people decide for themselves whether they want to choose to follow God or choose not to follow God in their lives. So you got this free will thing versus the absolute reality of what God's got in there. Okay, so those come together in a verse like this. Parents are to train up children in the way of God. What we need to take from that scripture is every parent is absolutely 100% responsible to their children to make sure they teach their children truth. Those children need to know what absolute truth is and where you find that absolute truth. And 99 out of 100, 99.999 out of 100, if you can communicate that truth to that child, and you have demonstrated through your life that truth to your child, which means sometimes you have to expose how you have failed, but how God has forgiven you of your failures and caused you to get back on the right track. 99.999% of that, when those children are old, they will not stray from the truth that they have learned. But it is very possible to have one stubborn child that it says, by God, I will do whatever it is that I want to do. Now, they had a way to deal with. Moses set up a way in the Old Testament law to deal with that. Does anybody remember what it was? Take them out to the gate, the city gate, and stone them to death. Okay, so that's always existed. That's not something Brother Steve's making up. Parents are responsible to God for communicating truth to their children. The children are responsible for walking in the way. That's their job to do that. The fifth truth that we can see comes from verse 7. Look at verse 7. It says, the rich rule over the poor, and the borrower is a slave to the lender. And all the people who've ever owed somebody money said, Amen. Verse 26 and 27, you can quickly look over at them. It says, be not one who gives pledges, who puts up security for debt. If you have nothing with which to pay, why should your bed be taken from under you? The Bible does not absolutely 100% prohibit borrowing money. I know that it says, owe no one anything except to love him. And I understand what Paul was saying in that particular situation. But the Bible does not say you can never, ever borrow money for anything. But it strongly discourages you from borrowing money from people. I cannot tell you the number of times in my life where after I bought something and I took a loan for that something, I paid my bills. I did pay my bills, but I strongly regretted buying what it is that I bought. I just detest having to pay interest. Can anybody show me the interest that they've paid in the past? You can't see the interest, can it? You can't touch it. You can't smell it. You can't feel it. You can't use it. And you can't spend it. Yeah, it's gone. It was the Bible does not prohibit borrowing, but it does strongly suggest that you stay away from it. Excessive borrowing always leads to ruin. See, the Bible, this chapter keeps taking you back to things that are going to cause you to wind up ruined. If you put way too much, let me ask you this. Have anybody ever in here known somebody who got so much money borrowed on charge cards that they were unable to pay the charge cards back? I'm not asking about you. I'm asking about somebody else right here. Okay, I'm not all right. It can happen, and it can happen in a heartbeat. And then people come in and take away the things that you have because you owe them. The sixth thing I wanted to look at tonight comes from verse 13, where it says, the sluggard says, oh, there's a lion outside. I shall be eaten in the streets. God's way is sovereign. And when God has given you gifts and abilities, and he's given you the brain to study and know how to be a doctor. He's giving you do what? What verse? 14? Was that 13? That was 13. Should have been 13. Am I right on that? Okay, 13. Yeah, God has given you the physical ability to do the job you do, or whatever that you got to do that. You begin to go out and accomplish those things because you know that you don't have to fear whenever God has called you to do what you do. One of the jobs that I know that I could not do, have you ever seen these really, really high telephone poles and cell towers, and they all have a little red light on top of them? You know, somebody gets paid for changing that light out. That guy can have that job. God did not design me with the physical ability to climb 2.5 miles, nor did he design me with the ability to hang out the side of a helicopter while it flies around in a circle so I can change a light bulb out until I can jump back on that thing, okay? I'm not afraid of falling. It's that sudden stop that I have a fear of. But when a person is a sluggard and doesn't want to use the ability that's God given them, and they choose not to become who it is that God intended them to become, they'll come up with all kinds of excuses about why you can't do that. Well, you know, I might get killed if I do that. Well, if I go out in the road, I might get run over by somebody along the way. Well, the fact of the matter is, if God has called you to a mission and he sends you out on that mission, you need to go out on that mission because God's hand will be there to protect you along the way. The seventh one comes from verse 14. Everybody look at verse 14 now. Look at verse 14. We see the mouth of a forbidden woman is a deep pit. He with whom the Lord is angry will fall into it. Now, I translated that into a little South Mississippi language, and I said, unbridled sexual desire will lead to ruin. There was a movie that I don't want anybody to go watch, but I was a younger man when I watched the movie, and I was captivated by the storyline, but I shouldn't have watched the movie. But it was called, I think the name of it had Burt Reynolds in it. It was called Boogie Nights. Has anybody ever heard of that movie? Don't go. I'm telling you not to go watch it. It's something you shouldn't watch. I wasn't a preacher when I watched that thing. But what it did is it showed these people who were sought after sex and sold movies and made movies and all that kind of stuff. And every one of the people who was involved in that, by the time the movie was over, the life had been sucked out of all of those people. And they had nothing left. And by the time they were 35, 38, 39 years old, they were just nothing. Because they'd given their whole lives away, seeking after something that was supposed to give them satisfaction, only to find out that it never really gave them any more than just a few minutes fleeting satisfaction. And they'd wake up the next day and it would all be gone. And we need to always remember that Satan loves to use sexual things to get people in that mindset, to try to find something that will satisfy them but will not satisfy them. And it'll wind up ruining in the end. The eighth one I want us to look at was the 15th verse, where it says, folly is bound up in the heart of a child, but the rod of discipline drives it far from them. We've heard it say, another verse in Proverbs says, spare the rod. No, it doesn't say that, but we say that. Spare the rod, spoil the child. That's a human proverb. Discipline drives out folly. And you got to find different ways to discipline children. I mean, sometimes I'm a firm believer in spankings when children are small because I think it's the best way to get across to them in the shortest period of time. But when a kid gets to be a teenager, sometimes you can beat the snot out of them. It just makes them meaner, you know. So what you got to do is you got to find the thing that hurts them the worst to be able to get through to. You as a parent have got to figure out the thing with your child that you have to do to get them to stop doing what they're doing, or to be able to see. Take a cell phone away. That's a tough thing these days. It really is. All right, but that's our job as a parent to be able to do that. And you see that folly is bound up in the heart of a child, and it takes discipline from the parents to be able to get that out. The ninth one is we see in verse 16. Verse 16 says, whoever oppresses the poor to increase his own wealth or gives to the rich will only come to what? Have y'all ever heard a message preached on that? When was the last time you heard a message preached on that? Thank you. I was hoping somebody would be able to say that. That's what I just love the way that particular verse lined right up with the message back from this particular week. I didn't see that until I was putting the message together at 5:30 this morning. Number 10, the last one I want us to look at is verse 29. Do you see a man skillful in his work? He will stand before kings. He will not stand before obscure men. Now remember, this is men writing to men, so this could be, in the case of a woman, it could be if a woman is skilled at what she's doing, she'll have an opportunity to stand before kings. Whenever you're good at what you do, you're going to eventually float or rise to the top because people are going to take note. Now, God gifts you, and the reason you can do what you do is because God gifted you to do it, but at the same token, you can feel good about yourself because you chose to develop the will that would cause you to actually be good at what it is that you're good at. There are people in this world who are gifted in ability, yet they have no drive in them and they choose not to do the will of God in them, and they'll wind up in a ruin, whereas that person who is gifted by God and then chooses to use their gift the way God intends them to use will rise up and they will work before the most famous of all people. And then the conclusion is this: God makes each of us, and He gifts us with His grace, with gifts and talents. So don't miss your call due to the distractions of self-gratification. Don't let the lure of another man or another woman pull you away from what God has gifted you with. Don't let the lure of monies and riches and things like that to pull you away from what God has gifted you from. Figure out what God put you here for and the gifts and abilities He gave to you, and you use that and watch the work that God does in your life. And all God's people said,